Welcome everybody to the Crawford County Masonic Appreciation Dinner. My name is William Piper. I'm a member of Newton Stewart, number 432. And I'm also a member of the Dwight L. Smith Lodge of Research under disposition. My wife, Robin, who's sitting beside me, she also made the buttons that are available up here. So if you'd like to have a button for tonight's event, they're up here. She and I were members of the Eastern Star, Chapter 590 in Birdseye. I am also the president of the Crawford County Historical Genealogical Society. Our headquarters is located just down the street here in town, across from the VFW. We also operate the Proctor House in Marengo. Our headquarters has thousands, and I'm not exaggerating, we have thousands of historical records, family histories, local histories, artifacts, etc. Our building is open on Tuesday and Thursdays from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we have a monthly meeting on the second Tuesday at 6:30 p.m., which typically has a guest speaker and is open to the public. The Proctor House, that's built in 1835-ish, is the only building in Crawford County that is on the National Registry of Historic Buildings. It is currently open via appointment or during one of our fundraisers. We recently started having fourth graders come out as a field trip, and that was a pretty amazing experience. We hope to continue that, but it does take a lot of people to pull that off. You can visit our website at cchgs.org. Tonight's speech, it relates to a project that I started back in January of this year. Most of the information presented in this speech is from my website, fhccin.org, which stands for Fraternal Histories of Crawford County, Indiana. So that's what the website looks like when you log on. So my research, it pulls from various books that we have over at the Historical Society, newspapers, and the help of several brothers. But I do want to mention one particular brother, and that's Christopher Hodap. He's the director of the Masonic Library at Grand Lodge. He provided me with a lot of great information and some photos, and you'll see him tonight, and it really helped flesh out some of this program. So while I do plan on emphasizing the Masonic lodges in the county, I will also highlight other fraternities. I do want to mention that my research is by no means complete, quite the opposite. I might have some errors in the dates. Some facts may be wrong, but if you've ever done historical research, you'll come across stuff like that. But this is what I've found so far. So during my research, I've come across over 50 different fraternities that existed in the county. Now, I want to mention all these articles I have up here are on my website, so I know they're kind of hard to see, but if you want to read them later, they're up on the website. So while doing this research, I noticed an interesting trend. It seems that during post-Civil War, about 1870s to the World War II era, 1940s, there was a huge influx of various groups, be it fraternities, church groups, veterans groups, etc. So this is also in reference to modes of transportation at the time. People were more stuck to the areas where they lived, so rather than driving to other areas for entertainment. So, today we'd go to Louisville, Corden, Jasper, wherever, but back then everybody was stuck to their own towns. Alton and Leavenworth were river towns, while Milltown, Marengo, English, Tazewell, Eckerty were all along the railroad. So while browsing through these old newspaper archives, I would find listings of what's going on in lodges during the week. These old newspaper archives, I use, I think it's newspaperarchives.com is what I use. They're an excellent source for fraternal activities. So on these here, some of these listed what lodges, what was going on during the week. Sometimes you'd have officer installations, just various things that you do not see in newspapers these days. So this newspaper article here mentions that Milltown Lodge is having a Master Mason degree. You don't see stuff like that in the newspaper these days. This here, that group is the Junior Order of United American Mechanics, and this article here was just speaking about a gathering that they were having. Now this article here is pretty neat. This is in regards to a Masonic Master Mason cave degree at Wyandotte. I'm sure most of you are all aware of the Oddfellows room that's located in Wyandotte Caves, but I was never for sure if the Masons have ever had a degree put on in there. But this article here mentions that they did. I don't have it on this slide, but I do have correspondence between Posey Lodge and Grand Lodge, and they talk about also putting on an inter apprentice degree the following year. But this article here, it's right out in the newspaper. It kind of tells you how they were setting up the cave and everything. So I thought that was pretty neat. So as you can see, the fraternities in the area were highly visible with the public. There was none of this internet conspiracy type of thing. It was all out in the open. Everybody knew about it. It was no big deal. It was just normal. So with this program, I will go through the towns of the county that I know had various fraternities. I will stray away from mentioning any religious, political, military groups, because if I did that, it would be in the hundreds. So I'm going to start with the town of Leavenworth. And these are all the groups that I found information so far. So in Leavenworth, you have the Free and Accept Masons, an Eastern Star, a Royal Arch chapter, an Independent Order of the Good Templars, which this has nothing to do with York Rite. This is its own separate fraternity. Then you had the Oddfellows and the Rebeccas, the Independent Order of Working Men, the Junior Order of United American Mechanics, and the Daughters of America, which was the female arm of that group. Knights of Honor, Knights of Pythias, and the Pythian Sisters, and the Modern Woodmen of America, and the Sons of Temperance. Posey Lodge, number 188 of the Free and Accept Masons, was chartered on May 27, 1856, and they consolidated in 2022 with Episcopal Lodge in Crawford. The first charter meeting was held on June 18, 1856. The charter members included, and I do apologize if I mispronounce any of these names, but Merle Wire was the worshipful master, Alan Thong, senior warden, Richard Kay, junior warden, John Collins, secretary, William Penny, treasurer, R.T. Anderson, senior deacon, J.B. Admire, junior deacon, and Nathan Harris as a steward and Tyler. And then the bottoms, the rest of the charter members. Now, you'll probably recognize this building. This is the Oddfellows building, which still stands in Old Leavenworth. Well, the Masons actually use this building as well. You'll come to see in my program, this was pretty common where the Masons and the Oddfellows would share the same lodge. This picture here was taken, I think, back in the 1920s. So this is actually before the flooding of Old Town Leavenworth. So for about a year, the lodge met in the Oddfellows Hall until March 4th, 1857. And then they moved into another building that is not designated. In 1862, they moved to the Kendall building, and in 1864 to the Mansfield building. Then they moved to the Humphrey building in 1870, and in 1883 they moved to the Oliver Whitcomb building. And in 1889, this building was deemed not safe, and the lodge moved to the M.C. Froman building and stayed there until the Great Fire of October 22nd, 1890. So this picture here is a plat map of Old Town Leavenworth. So at the very top would be where the river's at. So where I got circled there, that's where the lodge would be built after the fire. As you can see, it's right across the street from where the Oddfellows building is. So next time you're down in Old Leavenworth, if you know where the Oddfellows building is, it's just diagonally across from where that building was. So the building was built near the corner of Nelson and 2nd Street, and the lodge stayed there until the flood of 1937. During 1937-38, the lodge would then hold its meetings first in the room above Dr. Dean's store, and then above Chester Elliott's store, and then to the basement of the Presbyterian Church on Campbell's Hill. They would eventually build the lodge on the North 1st Street, and that's where they would remain until the lodge consolidated with Pisco. So this fellow here is Colonel Thomas Posey. So you had Posey Lodge in Leavenworth, so it was named after this guy. He was the Worshipful Master in Crawford Lodge for 9 years. He was a veteran of the War of 1812 and was quite beloved in the area. So thus, when the lodge in Leavenworth was granted disposition, they chose to name it after the colonel. So these pictures here were taken after the Leavenworth Lodge was closed and put up for sale. I do want to mention that there was an Eastern Star chapter, number 380, was chartered in 1913. I'm not sure when they ended. Also, the Leavenworth Masons had an Royal Arch chapter, number 80. It was chartered in 1873, and it lasted to about 1879 officially, but unofficially they ended in 1881. So moving to Alton, they had a Free and Accepted Masons, a Daughters of Pocahontas, which was the female arm of the Redmen. I'm not sure if there was a Redmen Lodge down there. I would imagine so, but my research hasn't proven that yet. We had an Order of the Oddfellows, Rebecca's, and a Junior Order of United American Mechanics. So Alton Lodge number 202 was chartered on May 26, 1857, and they merged with Posey Lodge in Leavenworth on September 19, 1970. I do not have a lot of information on Alton Lodge as the records are extremely sparse, but I do know the following were officers of the first year. So you had E.R. Han as Worshipful Master, R. Williams, Senior Ward, H.B. Malin, Junior Ward, H.C. Fullenwinder, Treasurer, B.J. Parr, Secretary, J.W. O'Neill, Senior Deacon, J.H. Milan, Junior Deacon, and J.C. Bennett as a steward and Tyler. In the 1890s, they were meeting at least twice a month on the first and third Saturdays at 7 p.m. That was from a newspaper article that I came across. This newspaper article here is from 1945, and it speaks of a brother, Decatur S. Gaither, who passed away on July 29, 1945. The article states that he was the oldest member of the lodge. He was initiated as an EA on July 4th, 1891, passed the fellowcraft degree on July 18th, 1891, and raised his blind degree of a Master Mason on August 6, 1891. So he went through his degrees pretty fast. He held most of the positions in the lodge, including Worshipful Master. The article did mention that he attended lodge meetings up until around the time of his death, which would be about 83 years of age. The newspaper article does mention that he was the last link between 19th and 20th centuries of that lodge, so he was the elder statesman. I also came across another newspaper article that stated that Alton Lodge had a good working relationship with the Masons in Meade County, Kentucky. So when one side of the river was holding degrees or meetings or whatever and they needed help, the Masons would take a ferry boat and cross the Ohio River to help the others out. So I thought that was pretty neat. So on September 19, 1970, the lodge was merged with Posey Lodge in Leavenworth. For many years, the lodge was the second smallest lodge in the state of Indiana. Post World War II, the membership decline was steady, and by the time they closed, they were down to around 30 members. The lodge was around for 113 years, and its building, which is pictured up here, was left as a community center, but today it is used as town hall. Just a side note, the Oddfellows had used this building as well. So this is a picture from an Oddfellows book in the 1920s, and this is what the lodge looked like back then. So moving to the town of English, which was originally called Hartford, they had the following lodges: the Free and Accept Masons, the Eastern Star, Oddfellows, Rebecca's, Junior Order of United American Mechanics, Knights of Pythias, and the Modern Woodmen of America. Crawford Lodge number 470 was chartered in 1874. I do not have a list of all the officers, but I do have the main ones. Robert L. Sloan was the worshipful master. Henry Huddleston was the senior warden, and William Byrd was the junior warden. Early information on this lodge is scarce, but towards the end of the 1800s, they were meeting on the second and third Saturdays of the month. One of the earliest mentions I find of the lodge is a newspaper article of a death notice from 1877 of Brother John M. Kincard. And there's the death notice there. So by the 1900s, the lodge starts appearing in more newspapers, typically mentioning busy degree work and the election of officers. Now this particular event here was the William English statue dedication that took place on June 23rd, 1900. So the picture in the top right, that is actually a picture they took. So if you're down in Old English, this has probably been up around where the railroad is, looking down at the statue. And if you look at it in the far background, you can see like the old school back there and stuff. So this picture here is pretty neat. I found this years ago when I was doing research on the statue. But the little newspaper mentioned there was sent out by Crawford Lodge, asking for all the Masons in the area to come out and help with this dedication. And for anybody who does not know, William English has nothing to do with Crawford County. He was a popular politician back in the day, so it's almost akin to somebody putting up a Trump statue or something, but he had nothing to do with Crawford County. Her early county history, written by H.H. Pleasant. After getting their charter, a hall was built and was used until around 1903, and then the lodge moved above the bank building. So if you remember Old English, the bank building there on the corner from where the library was, they used the upstairs. And they used that until around 1922. The 1903 date, I believe, is wrong because I found a newspaper article from November 1906 that describes the lodge finding a new home. So this article here is quite amazing. Like I said, this is on my website, so if you would like to actually read it through later. But it does list quite the number of other lodges visiting, such as Boston Lodge, Crandall, Bethlehem, DePaul, Joppa, Winslow, Solomon, Branchville, Arcadia, New Hope, Alton, Marengo, Milltown, French Lick, Posey, Pythagoras, and Great Bend. And they do have a list of all the guests from those lodges, and there's over 70 different guests. So when Crawford Lodge had their grand opening for their new hall at the time, they had over 70 different brothers coming together for this. So this was quite the turnout. At the end of the article, it mentions that a group photo was taken. So this next photo here, I believe, was taken from that event. If you count them all up, which I did, it definitely comes out way over 70. So I do think it is from that event. The actual picture still survives. It's located at Eckerty's Lodge right now. And it lists 1905 on the back, but I believe it's actually from 1906. So looking at this photo, it's quite rare to have that many visiting brethren together at one place. So I would love to see all of the brothers here tonight, if we could, after all the awards are passed out, if we could get a group photo so we can commemorate this special occasion. So over the years, the lodge would keep a healthy number of members and host various events. Like I say, you can't read this on the screen here, but if you go on my website, if you've been around English for a long time, you'll probably recognize some of these people in these photos. I believe a lot of these are from the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. But like most things in English, the flooding would cause the lodge to move around, and during its final decades in existence, it moved around a handful of times, one of which being the old courthouse on the hill, and then eventually ending at Town Hall. There's the old courthouse up on the hill. That's the sideboard. So on May 2nd, 2019, the lodge was merged with Eckerty Lodge number 719. So Eckerty, which was originally called Boston, they had several lodges. So far I've discovered 2 different Masonic lodges, an Improved Order of Redmen, a Redmen tribe, a tribe kind of think of it as like an independent body. Oddfellows, 2 different Grange lodges, and a Women's Christian Temperance Union lodge. Before I proceed, the information about Eckerty lodges, I want to give thanks to Richard Eastridge, Jim Kaiser, and Denzel Wilson. All 3 men are no longer with us. But those 3 literally wrote the book on the history on the western part of Crawford County. The Historical Society, we do sell their book. I plan on reprinting it in a cheaper paperback version. But if you ever want to know the history on the western part of Crawford County, that is the book for you. So Eckerty and Middletown, they shared a common trait of having 2 different Masonic lodges in their town. The first free and accepted Mason lodge in Eckerty was Boston Lodge number 498. Boston Lodge under disposition was started in 1873. A charter was granted on May 25th, 1875. It was delayed 2 years because the bylaws were badly written and contained much redundant matter. Also, the lodge performed careless work, such as poorly calling off a lodge, conferring the fellowcraft degree without opening the fellowcraft degree lodge, balloting for the advancement of candidates without examination to the proficiency, etc., etc. Boston Lodge held its meeting in a room rented from Fred and Julia Weedman on lot 73 for $25 per year. The lodge was started by the following charter members. Now, I'm not going to read all these names off, but the names that have an asterisk next to them, those brothers came up from Posey Lodge. So I'm assuming that when they started Boston Lodge, those who lived closer to Eckerty decided to come over, whether they had plural memberships or not. Now here would be your charter officers. You had G.W.L. Brown, Worshipful Master, Edward Cecilius, Senior Warden, John Williams, Junior Warden, Samuel Houston, treasurer. James Speedy, secretary. Henry Newton as senior deacon. W.J. McBurney as junior deacon. Christopher Eggerty, and yes, that is spelled correctly. He was the Tyler. Henry Knight was a steward, and Simon Poland was a steward. So Christopher Eggerty, it will later be spelled as Eckerty, which we now know it today. The town of Eckerty is named after his family. So just so you know, the town of Eckerty, the founding family, they were part of the Masons there. Chris came first. I believe he came over in 1870s, 1880s. His brother actually came to the town later on and joined the lodge. So the fellow on the left, that's Christopher Eckerty. I believe that picture was taken in 1885. You can see how rough he looks. I mean, that's how living was back then. On the right, there's Chris and his brother. This was taken, I believe, in 1915, if I'm not mistaken. So on October 21st, 1875, Chris Eckerty and his wife Margaret, they deeded lot number 19 to Boston Lodge. On May 24th, 1901, Chris and his wife deeded some more land to the lodge that was laying north of and adjoining lot number 19. That way they made the lot size a full size rectangle in shape, so it was 50 feet wide by 100 feet long. On May 2nd, 1874, a building committee was appointed and consisting of G.W.L. Brown, A.B. Tucker, and S.C. Brown. The committee hired Reuben Brown and James Brown to build the lodge hall. The bottom room of the hall would function for various stores. So during the Boston Lodge's existence, these were the businesses that rented the bottom floor out. And that does seem pretty complete. There's only a little bit of gaps in there. So the lodge would function as it is until May 21st, 1821, and their charter was then arrested. While I do have the full statement from Grand Lodge on why it was pulled, I'm just going to give a few highlights as the actual statement's pretty long. So a Grand Instructor had visited the lodge in October of 1920 and reported that the lodge was in serious trouble. It mentioned that the lodge could not perform any degrees and the rituals were not in accordance in how they should be done. The secretary was not keeping the minutes properly. The worshipful masters of the lodge were only elected so they can get a trip to Grand Lodge each year and not based on their work or merit. In January 1921, the Grand Secretary received communications from a member of Boston Lodge that the lodge had conferred the EA and FC degrees on the same candidate in one evening without any proficiency, which was a big no-no back then. A lodge of instruction was later held at the lodge, and the Grand Instructor witnessed various violations of Masonic law and a severe lack of any knowledge on conferring degrees. This led to an immediate suspension of the charter. On June 3rd, 1921, Henry Mock of English was appointed special deputy, and he closed up all remaining affairs in relation to the lodge. All the materials relating to the fraternity were sent back up to Indianapolis. So when the charter was revoked, Grand Lodge took ownership of the deed of the property and the hall, and then they took over the bank account as well. At the time, there was $520 in the account, and if you convert it to today's money, it's over $9,000. So a year later, a new lodge would begin to take root, and that is Eckerty Lodge number 719. The lodge was granted disposition on January 3rd, 1922. Omar B. Smith, who was the Grand Master of Indiana at the time, constituted and appointed Webster Ott as the Worshipful Master, C.J. Tucker as Senior Warden, and Henry F. Madley as a Junior Warden. The first meeting of the lodge was on January 10th, 1922, and Worshipful Master Webster Ott appointed the following officers: Porter Eckerty as Treasurer, Peter Newton as Secretary, Lawrence Brown as Senior Deacon, Pearl Graves as junior deacon, Sam Wright as senior steward, Ora Ash as junior steward, and George Belcher as Tyler. So between the transition of the closing of Boston Lodge to the opening of Boston Lodge, some of the brothers from Boston Lodge would move over to Eckerty, and some of them would not. I know at Newton Stewart we actually received some members of Boston Lodge because I was looking at their records and recognized some names during that time frame. But these four brothers did transition over. So starting on the far left, you have Lawrence Brown. The fellow next to him is Mac Tucker. And if you ever do any historical research in the county, Mac Tucker is an excellent historian. He has a lot of writings. Next to him is Porter Eckerty, and then on the far right, that is Webster Ott, who was the first worshipful master of Eckerty. So when Grand Lodge took over the lodge ownership, they did not give the building back right away. They charged Eckerty Lodge a rent of $25 a month, but then in November of that year, they bumped it up to $35 a month. The bank account funds that were seized, they were never returned. So Eckerty received her charter on May 23rd, 1922, and then on June 5th, 1922, the following officers were installed. Webster Ott as the worship master, Cornelius Tucker, senior warden, and Henry Madley as junior warden. The newly formed lodge met on the first and third Saturdays. Just like the previous lodge, Eckerty Lodge also rented out their bottom floor. Here's a list that's very incomplete of who occupied the bottom floor. And then in 2003, the old side building was taken down and a new lodge room was built. And these are some pictures here of that time period. So this picture here is of the lodge room upstairs as it is today. It's used for storage, but the reason why they built the side room is those stairs are pretty steep. So if you've been over to the lodge, you realize how steep it is to get up to those steps. But I do like the look of the old lodge room. It kind of has that early 1900s, late 1800s feel to it. And here is what the lodge looks like today on the inside. All right, so now we're going to move to Milltown. So just like Eckerty, Milltown had two different free and accepted Mason lodges. The first was Milltown number 475. They were chartered on May 26, 1874. The first officers were Joseph Sanders, worship master, William Gibbs, senior warden, and George Hahn as junior warden. John Funk was secretary, and I do not know who the other officers were. The lodge originally met in Speed's office, which was in the vicinity of the old railroad depot, and then they met on the building on the corner of Main Street, which was Dr. J.J. Johnson's office, and that was later sold to the Oddfellows. So that building is still in Milltown today. It's on the corner. I believe somebody's restoring it now, but this is another example where the Masons and the Oddfellows had shared the same building. So as you can see, they did not last long in Milltown. I suspect it was due to low membership because in the 1884 Grant Communications, it listed that there was only 14 members of the lodge. On June 4th, 1904, the charter was officially changed to Marengo number 475. So this here is from Grant Communications regarding that. So on their actual charter they have in lodge right now, they were not given a new charter written out, but instead there's a footnote written at the very bottom regarding this change. So here's some newspaper clippings I want to bring up involving the lodge. The first clipping on the left is from 1969. It mentions past master John Eddie Ross. He received his degrees in 1901 and served as worshipful master in 1909. It mentions that he went up to Grand Lodge several times as a representative for different occasions. The clipping on the right is from 1962. It's also about him. It mentions that he was the Marengo ambassador for the Scottish Rite Valley of Evansville, and also mentions that his father, brother, 3 nephews, and son-in-law were all members of the craft. And here is a picture of the lodge as it is today, the inside anyway. So since we're on Marengo, I want to mention the other fraternities that were in the town. So they had the Masons, 2 different chapters of the Eastern Star, Improved Order of the Redmen, Independent Order of the Oddfellows, Junior Order of United American Mechanics, and the Knights of Pythias. So the first chapter of the Eastern Star was number 105. That only lasted from April 23rd, 1891 to April 26, 1894, so only 3 years for the first charter. The second charter was number 495, and they received their charter in April 23rd, 1924, and then they ended on November 6, 2007. So this picture here is from the early 2000s, the picture of the Eastern Star symbol there in the window. And this is their charter, which is now listed as invalid. So back to Milltown, here's a list of all the groups I've found so far. 2 different Masonic lodges, an Order of Eastern Star, a General Federation of Women's Clubs, Redmen, Oddfellows, and Oddfellows Encampment, Rebecca's, Independent Order of Working Men, Knights of Pythias, Modern Woodmen of America, and a Grange. So Milltown number 661 was chartered on May 24th, 1905. Charter members included. I do not know who all the officers were, but I do know that William Shelby Ross, he was the worshipful master, but the rest of them were at least charter members. They originally met in the building on Main Street above Dr. Johnson's office, so the building I mentioned earlier. In 1933, the lodge moved to its new headquarters, which was above then the newly constructed Watson's hardware store. And this lodge would go dark during the summer months, July and August, due to the heat. They met here until 2008 when the building was sold to Phillips Air Conditioning and Heating. The lodge constructed the new building in 2009, and that is where they meet today. This picture here is from their opening in 2009. That was just from a couple months ago when I visited. And there's the interior of the lodge, and if you notice the ceiling in there, I know when I travel around, and I mentioned Crawford County, I always have people ask me, have you been to Milltown Lodge? Have you seen their ceiling? So it's pretty popular in the circles. It was painted by Brother Thomas J. Cercilius. So this next photo here I want to bring up is pretty interesting find. So this is one of those old postcard pictures that you might see like in antique stores. But this brother here, his name is Charles Smith. He was the worshipful master in 1909 of Milltown. Now this picture here, it was from the first time that we've had a Crawford County Masonic Appreciation Dinner. So this was back in 1972. The first winner of the award is in the middle. That is Darwin G. Cercilius. He was the, the past master of Milltown at the time. To his left is Dr. J.M. John, who was worshipful master of Milltown at the time. And then on the right is Sammy Lone. He was a past master from Marengo. And then on to the right there is the jewel that they presented him. Before I end this speech, I want to mention a few other towns in the county that had a lodge. So this here is in Tazewell. This was the Oddfellows Lodge. I have no idea where it was located. I suspect probably along the highway railroad area there in town. This is an Oddfellows building that was in Grantsburg. The bottom part was a general store. I'm not sure where in Grantsburg that was located. And this is an Oddfellows building that was in Sulphur, and I have no idea where that was located in Sulphur. As you all know, Sulphur is pretty steep, so I'm not sure where they had that located. But the Oddfellows were very prominent in the county. There was way more Oddfellows than there was Masonic lodges, but now there's no Oddfellows around here. So as I wrap this up, I want to emphasize the importance of preserving your lodge's history. Most lodges, they have the records in a mess, they're unorganized, certain time periods are missing due to weather damage or whatever. But today, with today's modern technology, I really implore to everybody, at least have a brother or two from their lodge who would go through the records and archive them properly and digitize them for future usage. I would love to see Grand Lodge maybe one day have a database where we could upload these records. That way brothers from all over could search them out. When you come across these old records, you can find really interesting stuff. This here is an example from my lodge. It's a petition from, I think it's the 40s there, I can't really tell. But there's a lot of good genealogy stuff in there. If you ever do research on people, it kind of lists their occupation, all kinds of stuff on there. So these old petitions are really great to have for research. I've also come up, when I was doing my digitizing at Newton Stewart, I found old correspondences with different grand jurisdictions. I found our original bylaws from the late 1800s. I found Masonic charters brought up on past members, so stuff like that. It's pretty interesting to find those. I just have an old desktop computer. It has Windows 7 on it. I have an old flatbed scanner, so it's not like it costs an arm and a leg to do this. You just find some old computers and it just takes time to go through them and do them. Here recently, I've taken on the task of digitizing whatever's left of Crawford number 470's records. So whatever was left, there was a lot of mildew and mold on them, so I'm gonna try to save the originals, but if I can't save them, I'm at least gonna digitize them for future usage. So once again, all this stuff that I presented here tonight, it's on my website, fhccin.org. You can contact me on that site. If you have anything you would like to add, if I messed up anything, you want to correct me so I can change it, that's fine. If you have any artifacts, I would love to photograph them, or if you would like to donate them. Over at the Historical Society here in town, I'm actually turning part of our building into a fraternal history exhibit. I will be getting some Crawford 470s furniture here in the next month or so. I'm going to take it over there. So, and it doesn't have to be Mason stuff. It can be Oddfellow stuff or whatever, any kind of fraternity stuff, because this stuff was very prominent at one time. It was a big part of people's lives, and we're kind of losing all this history as people pass away. So I definitely want to preserve it. So once again, I want to thank Nathan for allowing me to talk. I hope I didn't bore you all, and thank you once again.